We got a lot of hot topics to get to, but the first topic we're going to get to, Teddy, can you quit your day job, and do you have a World Series of Poker bracelet?
Yeah, no bracelets. No. In fact, and early, I didn't make it to the dinner break. I played like an ass clown. How do you play like an ass clown? Misplay aces. So I had pocket aces. I screwed the hand up. I was left with a micro stack, and that was that. Short and ugly for my tournament experience. Of course, had fun. And then after the tournament, of course, and I know there's a million people around are watching the game, and next thing you know, you're drinking. I'm hungover as hell today, dude. I don't drink much. Last night was a lot of fun, but I'm paying the price on a Friday morning.
Look, even though Teddy lost, we're all winners here. Why is that? Because Teddy's going to be on another episode right here of That Betting Show. Let's get down to some business, Teddy. Hot topics of the day. The Raptors take the title, winning Game 6, beating those wounded Warriors. And I got to tell you, Teddy, we saw it coming into the game. We talked about it time and time again right here on the show. It just seemed like the Raptors were overall the better team. The war of attrition, they won. But my goodness, when you have to take the heart of a champion like the Warriors, we're at home with that crowd going down. You saw the injuries late in the game with Klay Thompson. They just couldn't fight it off. And Steph Curry, after all of that, Teddy, had a wide open look to win that basketball game. Kudos to the Warriors for fighting hard, but an NBA champion has been crowned. It's the Toronto Raptors.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredible game. It really was. I don't care who you had a bet on last night. That was a fun game to watch. And as you mentioned, didn't matter who you had a bet on in that game. As Curry's shot went up to win, you were sweating. Of course, Kyle Lowry to me was a difference maker last night. Scored the first 11 points for the Raptors and led the offense in the fourth quarter down the stretch when obviously they had problems in Game 5 in a similar closeout. All that being said, they had maybe not just as many problems, but almost as many problems closing out last night's game. But the Splash Brothers didn't splash down the stretch like they did in Game 5. Curry missed his. As you mentioned, Thompson, the early reports are another torn ACL, which is just brutal. Durant and Thompson both struggled to play in the finals. Both play hurt, and then both get hurt worse. That's bad news for the NBA moving forward, flat out. It really is. But today's not the day to focus on that. Today's the day to focus on Toronto. Kudos to all of you who have the Raptors future tickets. Kudos to those of you who bet them in the finals. And heck of a series. It really was. The TV ratings in the States weren't what they wanted them to be. But frankly, that was a really good NBA finals. And an incredible, ultra-intense Game 6 with Toronto and over, ending up prevailing.
Yeah, that's all you can ask for. I mean, we take a look at the NBA, Teddy. It's a long season. It's drawn out. When you get to the playoffs, they really ramp up their energy. It's going to be interesting because one of the topics that's now coming up is you saw how Toronto took the season. They let Kawhi get healthy, resting him, 20 games with that load management, and it turned out to work like a charm because this team was healthy, this team was ready, and their superstar was ready for action. It was a fun game, and like I said before, we wanted the Game 7 as fans, and obviously depending on who you bet on that game. But yesterday was because if we're going back to Toronto, Teddy, let's play devil's advocate real quick here. If we were going back to Toronto, knowing that Klay Thompson had an ACL injury, what line we would probably looking at, Teddy, for that Game 7?
That's a good question. Raptors 5, Raptors 6, Raptors 7.
Yeah.
Although, if Golden State's off back-to-back wins, I don't think it gets to Raptors 7. Because now the momentum has shifted per se. Maybe 5.5. That's just a guesstimate. But of course, had there been a Game 7, look, Thompson and Curry went 16 of 16 from the free throw line. It was a 1-point game before the shenanigans in the last 0.9 seconds or whatever it was. The rest of the Warriors shot 5 of 14 from the foul line. If you want to finger why they lost in a 1-point game with 0.9 seconds left, the free throws that they missed ended up being difference makers.
Yep, and since we could put a bow in the NBA season, Teddy, it's never too early to look towards the next season and get some favorites out here. But we do have some huge question marks here, and it's going to begin with the champions. Is Kawhi Leonard going to stay in Toronto? Nobody really knows the truth on that. It seems like it fits like a glove. It's a perfect fit. But we all know Kawhi, sometimes a little bit out there with some of his decisions. We've heard him to the Clippers or heading out west maybe to the Lakers or trying to force a trade somewhere else. That should be interesting to watch. The GM, who's really a hot topic. I saw a report come out last night, Teddy. $10 million a year to go down to Washington and run their franchise, which is absolutely crazy. And the biggest part of the night last night that we saw, Klay Thompson goes down with an injury. Look, it's hard to come back from ACLs. It's even harder to come back for Achilles. Can they lay out, Teddy, $400 million in contracts for maybe two players that won't even suit up? Crazy.
The Warriors are in a bind and a half in this situation. They really are, because if you don't play the guys, as an organization, people will remember that. Hey, you ran him into the ground. You didn't pay them. They got hurt. And now, as an organization, the Warriors become less attractive for future free agents, flat out, period. All that being said, you can't pay these guys now. No freaking way can you pay these guys here at Golden State. Running into luxury tax issues. And to be honest, do you want Durant post ACL, a year removed? Do you want Thompson as max guys that you're having 5-6 years down the road? Are they going to be the same player when they come back? Are they going to be the same player 3 and 4 years from now? You're paying for it if they are. If I'm Golden State, it sucks. But I let both guys walk.
Yeah, no, look, and some people, oh, that's not fair, Teddy. Look what happens here. Look, the NBA, these guys have made a lot of money. You can't pay for past performance. You have to look forward. Now, the interesting part's going to be, because you're right, when you're up against the salary cap, you can pay Kevin Durant. You can pay these guys extra money. You'll pay an exorbitant amount of luxury tax, but also within the salary cap ramifications, if you have those two guys out, you have Steph Curry making big money, Draymond making big money, Andre Iguodala is still over $10 million a year. You can't build a bench. So theoretically, going into your new season next year as, king of the hill that you're used to, who is going to be on this team to even play? Because I've floated around a couple things here. Teddy, right now, if we take a look, Klay Thompson doesn't play next year, let's just say with the ACL. Kevin Durant sits it all out and they re-sign those guys. Are the Warriors a playoff team next year?
Probably not. They could well be a lottery team, even with Curry and Green healthy. And I'd say probably not. I mean, it depends on what the roster looks like. But, the Warriors lost the finals because their supporting cast wasn't as good as Toronto's supporting cast. And if you sign those two guys and say, all right, sit all year, well, guess what? Your supporting cast likely to be rather limited around Curry and Green moving forward.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of changes here too, Teddy. When we were punching up the script earlier this morning at Bet Online, we were showing the Warriors still at the favorite next year, plus 400, Bucks at plus 450, Lakers at plus 800. Those numbers are bouncing around all over the place. Pretty sure that those Warriors were dropped down. But the interesting part here is you're seeing some teams creep up. You say, wait a second, Teddy. I just watched the Raptors win a title. They look like the best team. They're plus 800. But that's going to signal in there because we don't know if Kawhi is coming back yet. There is a lot to go over and check back. If you had one bet to take right now, Teddy, on the futures market with these teams that we have listed between the Warriors, Bucks, Lakers, Raptors, and Rockets, who would you take a flyer on right now?
Not a one of those teams. Maybe Milwaukee would be the team that I would look at, but not at plus 450. I wouldn't. Look, 2020 feels like a changing of the guard season. Obviously, this offseason in the NBA has as much turmoil as any since LeBron made his decision. I guess, where you just don't know where these guys are going to end up and what the balance of power is going to look like. So in these situations, if you're dying to bet futures, boy, you got to look at some long shots that may be live to get some of these guys. The one team that stood out to me in that regard was the Clippers. Kawhi signs in L.A., and then all of a sudden Anthony Davis is in L.A., and all of a sudden they're a championship contending team, and they're not being priced like one necessarily in the early futures market. So the Clips, one squad I've got my eye on as a potential. But when you hear these rumors, when you see stuff, that's your time to bet the futures. Buy on the rumors, sell on the news.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm pretty sure, Teddy, our off-the-mic segments here throughout the summer are going to be littered with NBA talk, where guys are going to go. Because keep in mind, the draft is coming up next week. Free agency just after that, within the first few weeks of July. So it should be a lot of fun to watch. But it is time to talk some football. And how about this, Teddy? Boy, time flies fast. We're in the last division that we're going to take a look at here. It's in the AFC. It's the AFC West. Today's 2019 season team preview for that betting show. Those Denver Broncos, 66-1, Teddy, to win the Super Bowl in 2019, 33-1 to win the AFC, and also 6.5 is the team total, minus 137 listed at DraftKings. Last year, the Broncos 6-10, 2-4 overall in the AFC. The Case Keenum experience did not work out too well. He's been shipped off out of town, and guess who comes to town now? Joe Flacco. You draft a rookie quarterback, banged up at wide receiver this year, got a decent running and ground game. There's one thing this team can do, Teddy. It's going to be able to get after the pass rush because of what they have up front on their front four. Decent secondary in here. But what are the expectations that we're going to set here for the Denver Broncos? Tough division that they already enter into, and they're in flux. It's one of those where we look at that team total and say, well, hold on. Am I going to get Joe Flacco for 16 games, or am I going to go 3 or 4 or 5 games in, and then all of a sudden going to hand it over to the rookie? Interesting stuff coming up here for those Denver Broncos, Teddy.
You think there's a difference between Joe Flacco and the rookie? Look, they built a new statue in Denver in the offseason. I'm pretty sure it was Joe Flacco. Look, Flacco wasn't good. Flacco had one incredible playoff run that he parlayed into a $100 and something million contract. 2017, 2018, his numbers were literally exactly the same to the touchdown percentage, interception percentage, yards per attempt, sack rate, quarterback rating. He was Case Keenum last year and the year before. He's going to be Case Keenum this year, which means that at some point we're going to see Drew Lock. And anytime you talk about a team that's going to a rookie quarterback at some point in the season, you worry about that. Those aren't teams that I tend to look to bet over the total. All that being said, I mean, Denver was better than their record would indicate last year in a lot of ways. Yes, they were minus 0.2 yards per play, which isn't great. It's not a disaster. Plus 0.4 yards per rush. They were a good rushing team, tied for third in the NFL in yards per rush. The QB rating was bad, but 82.1 for the team. Opposing QB rating was only 90. They have a good pass defense still. You talked about the pass rush still being there. They were plus 7 in turnovers last year, so they had a bad record despite winning the turnover margin. But they did face a tougher than average schedule, significantly tougher than average. Although this year, once again, they face a much tougher than average schedule. Vance Joseph cost him probably 3 games by himself last year. They had 5 losses by less than a touchdown, and the coaching was a problem. Vic Fangio, first-time head coach, but a guy who we have a ton of respect for. Harbaugh's coordinator back at Stanford on defense, and he followed around and bounced around and ended up in Chicago last year and crafted a pretty darn good defense there. He's never been a head coach before, and you wonder about some of the communication skills from Fangio. Offense coordinator Rick Scangarello, defense coordinator Ed Donatello, I should say. A guy who's been involved in Denver since the 90s as a defensive backs assistant. When you look at the addition in the offseason, look, this is a bad offensive line. Mike Munchak as an offensive line coach should help. You bring in Juwan James, you draft offensive line with Dalton Reisner. We'll see. It's an offensive line that is a work in progress. And that, obviously, with a statue behind center in Joe Flacco, a bad offensive line is likely to be a problem. I like what he did in the secondary. Kareem Jackson, Bryce Callahan, 2 guys to bring in. Noah Fant has the look of a rookie that you might want to pay attention to at tight end. There's hope for Denver. This isn't a bottom feeder squad. All that being said, I'm not excited about the Broncos as a legitimate contender this year. They still feel like a sub-500 squad with their quarterbacking issues.